let me welcome you to the Working Together session. This is about working with other callers and Cuers. This is the 44th caller convention held in Mesa, Arizona. Today is Tuesday, April 11th. My name is Shauna Kaaria. I am the moderator for this session. You can bring me those.
She needs those.
Thank you. My glasses were just delivered by my husband. All right, and on the panel we have Don Casper, who is from
Mannheim, Germany.
I knew he was from Germany, but I didn't know where.
Yes, Don, that's correct. Yeah. Never mind. I've been a caller since 1979. Learned to square dance, learned to call, learned to round dance cue. I do line dancing. I dance clogging as well. And I have been on the board of the European Callers and Teachers Association for 10 years as round dance coordinator and 1 year as vice president. So there's a little bit of background here about me. Our session is working together, and I've kind of divided it up into 3 situations in my handout, which Steve was passing out at the back. First section is working with other callers. Now, this is mainly about working at a big festival. However, it would apply if you're visiting another club and you've been asked to be the featured caller. Things might change a little bit, but most of the things still apply. Please, please, please arrive with plenty of time before your session is supposed to start. Now, I know you have no control over any bad weather, any traffic jams, any road closures or anything like that. But this is mainly about big festivals, so I think you will be there on the day of the festival, I'm sure. And before your session starts, please be there with plenty of time to set all of your equipment up. And then don't be distracted by talking to other people. Make sure you're watching the clock at all times so you can start on time. That is important, that both of you get your program going at the scheduled time. Any laptops, tablets, whatever you use for your music, that should be charged up and ready to go at the scheduled time. And to do that, you might want to use a table that's not right on the stage, but backstage, or even on the floor that is away from the stage for charging up, so you are not visible on stage to the audience while perhaps something else is going on, but you are ready to go when it's your scheduled time. And when changing out equipment, and this is something I actually saw happen just recently at our big jamboree, as you change out equipment because another caller is coming up, make sure you turn the volume down before you pull any plugs on everything. Make sure everything is down before you pull out any plug. And unless you're scheduled to do a tip together, or it's the last tip, or whatever, there's more of you on stage, there should only be one on stage at any time, because any movement on the stage will distract from the featured caller, leader, doing his or her part of the program. And when you're done, try to get off the stage quickly. Don't stand in the middle of the stage and sign autograph books or sell your CDs, or do that off to the side. Someone else has the floor at that moment, or has the stage at that moment. If you would like to do singing calls together, and I know a lot of us do when we're at a festival, especially towards the end of the dance, make sure those things are planned in advance. It's not like 4 callers on the stage going, well, what should we do? Well, I don't know that one. Oh, I have a different version of that one. That needs to be prepared in advance. Know which routines you want to do, and even fake it. If you have to really fake it and you don't know it, make sure you don't go first. That you start and I can pick it up, or dance, sing the harmony, or do something else. And then also know who's going to sing the melody, who's going to sing the harmony, lower, higher harmony, whatever. Make sure you know all that in advance. If you're the MC, it's your club, you are the MC. Make sure you know what is expected of you. Are you going to be doing tips in between on the program as well? Or are you just going to do the first tip and then introduce the featured caller and maybe join the featured caller or callers at the end and the closing song? We have people that they say, my goodness, I've got this superstar caller. They don't want to hear me. They all came to hear him. I'm just going to introduce him and let him do the whole program, and then maybe finish harmonizing the last singing call with him together. Make sure you know all that in advance. Make sure you've talked to that MC of that club. And if you're not the MC, make sure you talk to the MC so everybody knows what's going on, at what time, and what's expected of you, when things are going to be done together, when things are going to be done individually, and where the breaks are going to be. If you're visiting a club, does that club have a meal break in the middle, a refreshment break? Is there a refreshment break at the end? Are there going to be pre-rounds and then a little break and then your program? Know what the program is going to be. And if you're being followed by another leader, you're doing advanced squares, and then you're going to have pre-rounds, and then you're going to have the evening program. Make sure you finish on time, perhaps a little bit ahead of time, so you have time to orderly put your stuff together, and the next person on the stage has enough time to orderly get their stuff organized. That applies also for the next section of my handout, which is working with round dance cuers. As I said, I'm a cuer and a caller, and I have done clubs where I've done both, and then I always get mad at myself because the cuer didn't turn the speed back down. After could I have this dance, he didn't put the speed back down to 45 or whatever. But those are things that can happen, and especially if you're working with other people who are the cuers. Make sure the volume controls, the speed controls are where you want them, and if you have moved it, move it back to where it was. Okay? And also, if you're the square dance caller on the program, please let the cuer know, are you going to do a little easy, mellow stuff at the beginning, build up, high energy, and then come back down and nice melodic singing calls at the end? The cuer will try to fit in his program, hopefully, if he's a good cuer. Know to do easier stuff at the beginning. As you go high energy, he'll go high energy. You might do a jive or a cha-cha during that part, and then as you come back down, that's the time for a waltz or a nice easy two-step that everybody knows the tune. Okay? Good cuers will know how to do that and work with the caller, because both programs should complement each other and not fight with each other to make the whole dance a big success for everyone. And as I said, know where your mic settings are. Make sure the settings are where you need them before you turn it on, and we get the nice little squeal or the big explosion of sound. Okay? And of course, at the end of your last session, always acknowledge anyone that you have worked with on the program. And please do not start packing up until the whole dance is finished. Yes. Please do not start packing. That goes for cuers as well. I know some cuers that are on the stage still sorting their music or shutting down their computer or putting their cue sheets away while the callers are trying to do the last singing call. And that's no-go. One person on the stage, unless you're doing something together, one person on the stage. One is the star, the rest is background. Okay? And working with other club leaders is the third part of my handout. Obviously, you've got to know, when does the dance start? I've got to be there on time. When is the dance going to be over? Is there a deadline, perhaps, for leaving the hall if you're working with another club? Do you have to be out of the hall at 10? Well, you can't finish your program at 10 because you've got to put chairs and tables away yet. You've got to allow time for that. And make sure you're watching the clock, too, so you have enough time for that. Don't get so carried away that, it's 2 minutes to 10. We've got to quit now, and you just cut the music, and that's not professional. Know your program. Know when you have to end. Know where the breaks are. Are there going to be announcements? Is there going to be a raffle? Is there going to be a meal break? Is there going to be refreshments before, after, during? Is there something special that has to be announced because there's another festival going on, or there's some dignitaries at your club? At that club where you are, and we've got to acknowledge that the chairman of CALLERLAB has walked in the door, is with us tonight, or whatever the case may be. And also know where your money is coming from, who to talk to, who is the treasurer, where are you getting paid, how are you getting paid, and bring your contract with you, just in case they say, well, we're supposed to charge you, we're supposed to pay you this, and you can say, no, I have it here in writing. This is what you pay me. And if a conflict should ever arise, take it off the dance floor. Dancers don't need to hear that. Make sure you go and speak, as the Germans say, under four eyes. That means, it's one-on-one. Speak face-to-face and always speak calmly. Be a professional. You can resolve any issue by just being calm about it, and things will work out. And if it's starting to be one person against the other, remember the show must go on. Be a professional. Bring your program to its close. Make sure the dancers have a good time. And if you have an argument with one of the club officials later, make sure the dancers are gone. That's what I have.
All right, thank you. Do we have any questions or input at this point? If we do, we've got the microphone here. And state your name, where you're from, and...
I'm Erin Byers from Sacramento, California. I have witnessed in many dances callers coming in during the round dance program and setting up during the round dance program, and I've seen many, many, many cuers pack up during the caller's last tip and walk out of the hall. The message that is transmitted to the dancers is, I don't care about this other part of the program. It's not important. So the callers are saying, this event isn't important enough for me to show up on time. Or, you know, they consider they're on time because they haven't started yet. And the cuer's leaving saying, this last tip isn't important. The dance is really over, so I'm leaving. I think that's absolutely the wrong message to send to the dancers. We are hired for the event, and we should be there before it starts, and we should stay until after it's over.
And I can relate to that. Just recently we had a big jamboree in Europe, as we call them, and the next caller on the program went up while the round dance cuer was still doing her last tip for her section, even though there was square after her. The next square dance caller got up there and just started pulling plugs, and all of a sudden, sound went out. You don't do that.
Rochelle Catt from San Diego, California, and I'm a round dance cuer down in that area. And one of the things that I've noticed in some of the dances that I've cued for is that I'll be up there trying to do my round dance set while the caller is having a conversation next to me with the club dignitaries or other dancers or whatever, and that can be extremely distracting and can carry bad over to the dancers.
Or signing friendship books or selling CDs, and it may not be on the stage, but it'll be right in front of the stage, and that's the no-no too.
Hi, Steve Mazzell from Puyallup, Washington. I just wanted to get on a recording today.
Well done.
I got recorded. No, what I come to find out, at least up in Washington, the callers are the ones who are usually the first ones there, and we're using our equipment, and so we get control. I'm anal about being on time, and to me, if you're not 15 minutes early, you're 15 minutes late. But I think with callers, if you have control of the equipment, you have control of the dance, and especially at the last dance. But you know, I know it's an unwritten rule up in Washington, but I don't know about other parts of the world. But that's all I got.
Alan Hurst, Sunnyvale, California. A very wise lady once told me many years ago when I was first starting to call, if you're working with anybody else, whether it's a cuer or a caller, step up, shake their hand, introduce yourself before you start, ask if they want the name pronounced a certain way, and you introduce each other. You can even do warm handoffs. And now back to the fabulous dulcet tones of Shauna Kaaria. And you can play off each other that way, and it makes it feel much more like an integrated event, and it's the professionally appropriate thing to do.
Sorry, Rochelle Catt again, San Diego, California. Quick question. So recently, my husband and I had pretty much all of our equipment stolen out of the back of our car. So we just recently got it all replaced, and protocol that I was taught was that if you go to another caller or another cuer's dance, you don't bring your laptop in. If they ask you to come up and do a guest cue or a guest tip, then you would go out to your car, get your laptop, and come back in. Well, we're a little skittish about leaving our stuff in our car anymore, as you can imagine. So what would be the proper protocol that we could follow to make sure that we're not stepping on anybody's toes, but that our stuff is secure?
Well, I walk back to Steve. If you know the caller usually says bring your stuff anyway. It's okay to bring your computer, just keep it in the back, you know? Aaron? Oh, sorry, Steve.
Steve Green, Monroe, North Carolina. In working with a lot of callers and cuers, some cuers actually do have their own equipment, and want to use that, do that ahead of time. If you know you're doing a dance with a Cuer, then you want to contact them well ahead of time just to make sure and iron out those arrangements.
Down in Southern California, the round dance Cuer usually is there first. You can hand her the microphone.
This is Shauna Kaaria speaking.
I figured they might know that since I was moderating. But anyway, with all the voices going around, who knows? But if I'm, as a Cuer, I work with multiple callers throughout the year. I have one club. I'm there every third Saturday. And if I'm working with a caller who is familiar with the equipment that I use, they'll sometimes call or text me ahead of time, do you mind if I share your equipment? I never mind if they want to, and they usually will ask ahead of time. So sometimes we share equipment, sometimes we don't. But it's always proper to ask the question ahead of time if possible.
And Don Casper, again, to answer your question, I would say, since you've had such a bad experience, ask if you can bring your equipment in and just leave it inside the hall. It would be more secure than out in your car.
Lisa Wall, round dance Cuer from Bisbee, Arizona. Been queuing since 2000. I have never once ever had a caller call me about his equipment. I usually always bring my equipment unless I fly. It stays in the trunk of my car. But my question is as a round dance Cuer, I have a kind of a different perspective on where I want to be able to hear my cues. So how do I go about telling the caller politely that, one, I'd like to not be at the back end of the table, only because, and I'll pick my laptop up every time if they'll let me do it. How do I get them to move the speaker back slightly? Because to me in the round dance world, it's whether or not you can hear me. And I'm pretty good at being heard. But I like the speaker back. I mean, I've heard Tony Oxendine say, hang your toes off the front of the stage. That makes a caller. Get up there, call, hang your toes, and call to the people on the floor. Well, that means that speaker is right there at the end of the stage, and I cannot hear the blend. How do I approach a caller and say, could we move it back 1 foot?
We have volunteers to answer your question.
Judy Russell, Oregon, Cuer. I have the same issue. I have a hearing loss in my right ear. So for me, the speaker really needs to be not only a little bit behind so I can hear it, but it needs to be on the other side. I solved that problem and I'm lucky. I know the halls, and I know for the most part the callers I'm working with. I bring a monitor, and they are happy to, if they're sharing their equipment. If not, I have my own equipment to plug it in. I put on a monitor, but you have to remember to turn it off when you leave, because the caller probably doesn't want it.
Darren Galena, Lompoc, California. I don't know, it's interesting to hear about callers and cuers sharing equipment. It's been so long since I've heard that. You know, where the majority place where I call in California, cuers have their own equipment, callers have their own equipment. To answer your question about how do I ask the caller, it just like you did, hey, can we move it back? Most callers should be accommodating to that. If you're sharing equipment, you're looking at me and I assume you've run into callers who don't. Oh. So anyways, what I was going to say is I'm selfish in a way that everybody likes to use their own equipment because they're comfortable with it and they understand how it works and the certain nuances within the sound that you get. And I'm selfish in that way, and I want my own table. So that's another way to kind of get around it. I always get nervous when I walk into the hall and there's one table, and the round dance cuer has gotten there ahead of me. Round dance cuers have, and this is not a dig on round dance cuers, they have more equipment than I bring in. I try to pack as light as I can, and so and it's not that I don't want to share a table. It's just not enough room for either one of us. Give us both our own tables. And there's this one time I worked with this cuer, Anita. No. I love working with Anita. Yeah.
Anita's here.
We
He's
work
teasing.
good together.
All right, so before we go on to more questions, let me go through. Did you have something to just a quick follow up? Two more quick follow ups, and then we'll.
Steve Mazzell, Seattle, Washington, or Puyallup, because nobody knows where that's at. My thing is, when we're up there, whether you're a caller or queuer, you're a team. You have to work together, and callers work with the queuers. Queuers work with the callers. We can't be selfish because we're already dying as is. And if there's infighting between the two, we're not helping ourselves.
Alan Hurst, Sunnyvale. Lisa, one of the things I would suggest, and there is no shame in this, is say something like, I have a hearing disability or I have a different ability. I need to have the speaker here so I can get some feedback. No one is going to question that. And if they do, well, they're just not a very nice human being.
She doesn't. But yep.
Yep.
Aaron Byers. The only time it would really matter is if you're on a stage that has like a drop front, or the room that you're in has dividers that come down and would block the sound. And if you don't put the speaker right underneath so it can shoot past that barrier, you could have a problem. But that doesn't mean that they can't find another way to make it work out.
And this monitor idea is probably the best one I heard. Always have just a small speaker you can use as a monitor to pull in. You can plug it in and have it right. Yeah.
As in comment to a monitor speaker, my husband was a caller. He had a monitor speaker. How do you make that work on the thing where I can hear both my cues and everything and adjust the volume on that speaker? I have an MA150. I'd like to see how you wire that.
Can we take that one offline? Okay.
Most of those amplifiers have a monitor out and a speaker out, and with separate volume control. So that's easily handled. Okay, let's move on to this other sheet, my notes. And the thing that I put right at the top is common courtesy. It's really that simple. If we remember common courtesy, we don't even need to have this session most of the time. We're all there for the dancers, and let's work together. So I broke mine up into two separate sections. Everybody say cheese for the camera. Oh, I just Kodak moment. When you're sharing a dance or a tip with other callers was the first section I had. Now it's your turn to say cheese, yes. All right, when you're just sharing a single tip, as Don said, have your computer, your phone, your tablet ready to go. And if you're using your phone or a tablet that has connectivity, don't forget to go in airplane mode. That's for your sake. Because trust me, if another caller is in the hall and sees you on your phone, they'll call you. I'm not going to name names, and they're not in this room. But I have had callers tell me stories of how they got someone else. So protect yourself. Airplane mode is your friend. And even if somebody's not playing a trick on you, your mother might call or your kids might call. And the dancers don't need your phone ringing across the speaker in the middle. It cuts out the music. It's not good. All right. If you're working with someone that you don't know and you don't know a lot about their skill set, ask them. Take the time before. Do you prefer to sing melody? Do you prefer to sing harmony? Can you sing harmony? If you can't, I can. Will it bother you if I sing harmony? Is it going to pull you off the melody? Not everybody can hang on to the melody when someone's right next to them singing a different note. Ask those questions ahead of time. And if they say yes and you start to sing and you realize that they're following you to the harmony note, go back to singing melody or just taking turns. But ask those questions ahead of time. And this is great for newer callers. If you're an experienced caller working with a new caller, you might say, I'm happy to work with you. How are you doing? Do you need me to have your back just in case you lose your corner? I'm lucky enough to be married to my caller coach. I can't tell you in the early days how many times I'd be calling along, working my memorized stuff, and something went haywire in my brain, and now all of a sudden I'm up there floundering. And he's just back there whispering. Nobody even knew that I wasn't fixing it myself. He wants to say something.
Yeah, Vic Carey, the moderator's husband. Even if you're working with Jerry Story, keep track of the corners, because Jerry can have a mental hiccup. Tony Oak, whoever you're working with, always know at least 2 squares of corners in case there's an issue. He may only be watching 1 square, and it may break down, and then you just walk in and whisper in their ear.
So yeah, don't be afraid to say, hey, do you need me to have your back? Oh, I've got your back. Or if you're new, be there in case I need you. Ask them ahead of time, and they'll be prepared to help you.
Yeah, I was just going, Don Casper, a panelist. I was just going to say my very first weekend special dance was in Worms, Germany, and I had just been an active member. Or actually, I wasn't an active member yet. I had just taken over that club like 4 weeks ago, 4 weeks prior, and here I was, the newbie, dancing calling with a person who had been calling for. Let's see, his 50th anniversary is coming up, so he must have been calling over 15 years already. And I was frightened as all get out. And I did ask him, I said, can you watch to make sure that I don't lose track of the squares here? And it was the first couple of things worked fine, and then I was confident. Then I got it. But that was such a big help to know that someone had my back in case I would make a mistake.
All right, if you're sharing a full dance with another caller, and there's how many tips a night? If there's rounds, maybe 6 or 7 tips. There is no rule that says because both your names on the flyer, you have to do every tip together. Do the opening tip together, and then take turns. It allows each of you to shine throughout the evening, and then you start the dance together, finish the dance together. If it's someone that you guys love to sing together and harmonize, do them all together, but there's no rule that says you have to, at least not that I know of. And I just lost what I was going to say. No, there was something else on this. I'll come back to it when I remember it. If there's a lot of callers in the hall and we have one of those gang sing situations, here's a very important thing to remember. Louder is not better. I've heard people say, well, we weren't good, but we were loud. Like that's a good thing. Louder is not necessarily better. And it is okay if there's 7 callers on the stage to be up there singing your heart out with your microphone off. Nobody's going to know. And then you click it on when it's your turn to take a figure. It's okay. And be listening. If someone else is singing your part, you don't need to double them up. Louder is not necessarily better. And usually it isn't. When multiple callers are on the stage for a tip, and you're doing patter and one of them's calling, the other 2 callers should not be chatting with each other during your calling. I've got someone in the back who's now folding his arms and saying, I don't know what you're talking about. So
Do you call with that other caller sometimes?
It's not Darren. Darren's pointing at Vic. When I put this together, I wrote this down, and he's like, what do you mean? If you all know Vic, he's a jokester, and he's very fun to call with at a dance. But there was one situation, and I was really new at the time. And if I'm going to throw Vic under the bus, I should throw the other one under the bus, too. And my good friend Charlie Robertson. The 2 of them were just having fun. They were telling jokes across the table. It's a guy thing. And I was shaking in my boots trying to remember my sequences because I wasn't sight calling yet. And they've got their jokes going across, and thankfully I made it through. But I'm like, that wasn't very nice.
Then all of a sudden you say, and here's Charlie.
That's a good thing. If I'd got stuck, I would have. But I made it through. But not everyone can maintain their concentration with that stuff going on. So be aware. And I think they knew me well enough to know we can play with her a little bit. And I use that as an example. Make sure you know who you're working with. And if it's their turn to call, give them the respect to call. And don't purposely try to distract them as they're up there. And then another thing that I learned from Vic, because I watched him do it, and Mike Seastrom, when they used to work together quite a bit, and they would take turns on the tip, take turns during, each do a tip. If they're calling the same tip, they're working patter, I would hear Mike call something and work a particular sequence or a particular call. Next time Vic took his turn, he's working that same call from a different place, building on what Mike did. And as a new caller, I'm going, wow. I'm just trying to remember my module. And they're up there building on what each other's doing. Once you get to that skill set, pay attention to what the other caller is doing. Build on it if you can. If not, just reinforce it. Keep the theme in the tip. All right. Also, pay attention during singers. What did I say about not distracting when someone's on the microphone?
Was that about chatting with each other?
Steve Green is now under the bus with me.
Do we have to separate you two?
All right, let me get through this real quick. During singing calls, lots of callers do heads, heads, sides, sides. Not all of them. So if you're taking turns on the figures, pay attention. Started with heads. Did they say sides next? Or did they say heads again? Because when it's your turn, it's good to know whose turn it is when you're calling.
And watch where the middle break is and the closer.
Who put that microphone in his hand? Is it on?
Test. Vic Carey again. If you're the second figure person, chances are you're going to be the third figure person. So if the first one says heads, and you say heads the first time, say sides the second time. But if you say sides the first time as figure number 2, then you say sides again as figure number 3. And then only the number 1 person needs to remember that and do heads at the very end.
So if you go second, you don't have to think?
That's why I
point?
go second.
All right, and the last one that I have for working with another caller is be aware of vocal differences and varied experience. And never pressure another caller to take a part of a singer they're not comfortable. And as a female caller, especially when I was first starting out, I don't do a singing call in the key that it was originally done. I, without exception, shift it one way or the other to some degree. When I'm working with another caller, I'm singing harmony. And then they get to 1, 4, or 7, the open middle closer, and they say, take it. And I'm like, I don't want to take it because I can't sing the melody like you can. So don't be afraid to tell them, I'll take the figures, I can sing harmony on the figures, I can speak the figures if I need to. Don't be afraid to say, I don't want to take it there when we're working together. I'll do that when I'm on my own or when we're singing in my key and you're harmonizing with me. So it's your reputation. Don't be pressured to do something that you're not comfortable with, and don't pressure someone else to do something they're not comfortable with. Just be aware of the differences, not just with male and female voices, but inside male and female, there's different ranges. So just be aware and communicate. We had comments.
Lisa Wall, Bisbee, Arizona, Cuer. I have never had this problem with dealing with callers at a festival. Let's go back to club calling, where you're in there every week. I had a particular caller that fashioned himself a cuer. So he would get up behind me and cue a half a measure ahead of me, just to prove to me that he could cue. And knew enough that I was scared to death. He was messing me up. I finally, at one of the dances, turned around and handed him the mic. I figured if they're not going to hire me, I'm not going to deal with him anymore. How should I have dealt with that? I'd asked him to not do it.
Yeah, if you had asked him to not do that, I don't know if it made a point to hand him the mic. It probably did. If you've gone directly to him and he's continued to do it, I don't know that I have a better answer. Did that solve the problem?
It solved the problem for me, and then I got ready to train a new cuer, and the first thing I warned her about was that particular caller. And she was better at doing it than I was. She was more subtle.
Was it a club caller or someone?
It was a club caller at a Fifth Saturday dance.
Did you speak to the club leadership about it? No? Yeah, you probably would want to talk to the club leadership about it. Yeah, if it's a caller-run club, you might be in trouble, and that might be the time to say, yeah. At that point, you might say, find another Cuer. But if it's, talk to the club leadership at that point. If you've already addressed it with that caller and they're still acting that way, common courtesy is not part of their vocabulary, I would guess, and it's time to, it's silly that we have to be elevating things that way, but it does happen. So let's moving on to callers and cuers working together. Callers, don't cue behind her or him, or even from the other side.
I've had a caller that said, "Can I sing the song that you're queuing to while you're queuing?" Huh? What? It's my turn to shine. I didn't say that, but that's what I'm thinking. It's my stage. It's my stage time. My mic time. I don't need you.
Well, yeah, but
it depends who it is and how it's presented. To have the guy just jump up there and say,
yeah. Right. If the caller asks you, hey, if you do, could I have this dance? Would you like me to sing? Make sure you're comfortable queuing, because I've been queuing for quite a long time, and I had a caller who wanted to sing the two-step, and I'm like, go ahead. It was distracting. I mean, I got through it, but it's distracting in a way that you don't realize until you try to do it. The biggest fiasco that I had, I was queuing. We were working with the ghostwriters, and Vic was calling with them, and it was going great. And then they said, I was going to do Neon Moon. Want us to play it? Oh, that'd be great. They can play Neon Moon while I queue. They were way too loud for the queuer to be heard. I mean, I was, and the poor dancers, and we muddled, we pummeled on through and finished it, but that was an experiment that we never did again. Yeah. The band thought it was fun. We thought it was going to be fun, and in the end, it was not a good experience for the dancers because they could not hear me, and so then they couldn't dance. All right. The first thing working together is share the stage. Not all stages are created equal. Sometimes we need to set up in less space than we prefer. When possible, separate tables. Great. When Vic and I work together, we are usually sharing the amplifier, but we each have our own computer. And he jokes, oh, she gets to be in front, she's the most important. But I'm looking at a screen and I'm reading cues. And he recognizes that, and he teases me about it. But, when you have one table, if you have to move it between tips, computers move. They're portable. That's the reason for that. In a perfect situation, you have two tables. I had one situation where I was sharing the dance with another queuer. There were two queuers that night. And they had two tables. And the queuing table, by the time we were done setting up, was covered with that queuer's equipment and records and iPods and this queuer said, all right, it's your turn. And I'm like, where do I set up? We ended up going to the back room and finding a podium for me to put my little computer on and one little wire that she would let. I'm like, we're not working together very well here. So when you're working with someone else, recognize you may not be able to have all the space that you usually want. Don't force them to go find a little portable stand in a back room to be able to do their job. All right. And like I said, this applies to callers and queuers working together. If you're going to, in California, as Darren said, usually the queuer will have their own equipment and the caller has their own. That's more typical. And if you know the caller or queuer, Ray Garza will always, he sets up his bows, but he'll have an MA150 for the caller to plug into. It's fantastic. We always have our equipment with us, but when we walk in, here you go, and it works great. But we don't expect that. If you are going to, I've had callers who come in and say, can I tap into your power? Absolutely. Don't tap into the power if you don't tell them. I worked with a caller, and I'm, again, not going to name names. They came in and poked a little fun at my power cord because I had a triple tap plugged into a triple tap. And the reason was on the original one, there was one that didn't work. So I had a reason for it, but he was kind of poking fun. What's with this? I'm like, I know it's silly, but there's a reason for it. What I didn't know was that he had used one of them. And so at the end of the dance, I went and pulled, all I did was pull the plug. I mean, I wasn't tearing down. I just pulled a plug so that I was not, and it was actually in another room. I had left. The cord was around in another room. And I'm in this back room, and the hall went deadly quiet. I'm like, oh, I wonder what happened. Seriously. And then it occurred to me, oh, man, that was me. And I plugged it right back in, and the sound magically came back on. And it hadn't missed a beat because the laptop had a battery. And it was, so let someone know. Now, if I had not even went to pull the plug, that wouldn't have happened. But be aware when you're using someone else's power that they know so they don't just pull a plug on you.
Pat Carnison was not happy.
No, actually, he laughed quite a bit about it. He said, I watched her go in that room, and I knew, I bet she's going to... And yeah, so he knew it was coming.
Just tell him you tripped over the cord by mistake, that's all.
And then about equipment. So Ray Garza comes in, he's got his bows, he hands you the MA-150. I typically use a Fender. And so if they ask if you want to plug into the equipment, great if you do. But if you are more comfortable with your own equipment, it's okay to say, thank you so much, but I'm real comfortable with mine. I'm just going to set mine up too. There's no rule that says you have to accept the invitation. Again, it's your reputation. You want to make sure you have control over what you're doing. All right. We talked about this already. Pay attention to the music choices of the caller and the cuer. It goes both ways. Work together. As a cuer, I don't know about the other cuers, but I know you do too. You put out request lists, and you get requests for songs, and I'm always paying attention to when the caller does more a ballad thing so that I can get the waltzes in. I tend to try to put the more slower flowing ones in the pre-rounds where I'm not going to mess with the flow of the peaks and valleys of the dances, of the dance itself. I was talking to another caller the other day who said the thing that drives me the most crazy, and we all know not every song, every hall has perfect sound. Okay? Sometimes, really? Sometimes they're an echo chamber, and it's all you can do to keep a voice over the music, and they just fight with each other already. And then the dancers are there for a good time, and they're chatting and talking, and then you hear this shh, as either the caller or the cuer is shushing someone. And in this case, a cuer had been shushing the dancers, and he's like, I just spent that last tip bringing up and building and entertaining, and they just went, and that shh was all the energy I had built in that balloon deflating out of it. There are other ways to deal with sound problems. And we have found sometimes there was a particularly bad hall in Palm Desert area. And when I was cueing, thankfully I had Vic there, and he was dealing with the sound and the echoes. We actually turned it down rather than up because it forced them to quiet and listen. That's not always the answer, but sometimes softer pulls the other sounds in the room down too, and then you can put it back to the proper level. So there's multiple ways to deal with that.
Susan Snyder from Jacksonville, Florida. One thing that I try if the dance gets to the point where there's too much noise around the room is I will try to do a couple of songs, I'm a round dance cuer, that gets everybody up on the floor. You're having trouble with too many people talking, put on Frenchy Brown, and everybody will get up. So that's one way to keep them quiet is to do something that everybody knows how to do.
And that is a great point because the callers don't have the same problem of they're heard because most of the people are on the floor. And when you've got fewer round dancers, you got more chatters on the side. You have the same problem? Okay. I haven't seen that, so I'm not happy about that, but it's good to know. All right, and then we talked about this. Callers and cuers take the conversations away from the front of the stage between tips while the queuing is going on. You may think that you're over on the side, but even if you're still in front, you guys are callers for a reason. Your voices carry. And it's amazing how well sometimes they carry. And yeah, Erin says she can hear Scott. Yeah, everyone can hear Scott. So just recognize, even when you're whispering, there you can take that conversation down the side of the hall just a little way. Some cuers know these things very well, and that you're not going to bother them, but even the most seasoned cuer can get distracted. Sometimes we're distracted enough by what else is going on in our brain, and then we're trying to turn out these other voices that are coming in. So just be aware of that. Callers and cuers, we talked about introducing yourself if you don't know them before, introducing each other. At the end of the evening, recognize each other. Before the last round, the caller should say, how about a nice hand for so-and-so on the rounds tonight? And then the cuer, as they get up for their last tip, how about a nice hand? Recognize each other at the end of the dance. If there are other callers or cuers in the hall, if you don't know their names, go find out and introduce them at some point throughout the evening. You don't have to bring them up to call with you. You don't have to offer them an opportunity. If you do, make sure you get the approval of the club leadership. But you don't need to get permission to recognize another caller or cue in the hall, and you should do that. And then this one is really important. This was actually a point that Vic made. If you're a guest caller coming in and that cuer is there every month, recognize that they have some expertise where that club is concerned. And if they're trying to offer you some advice, you should listen. They know the club. If you want to know when they take a break, the cuer probably knows. If you want to know how they do announcements, the cuer probably knows. They are a fountain of information because they're every month. They know the people. They know how it works. So tap into that information. All right, we've got a few more minutes. Do we have questions, comments?
Erin Byers again. There is a very old friend of mine who used to be a cuer, and he had a lot more abrasive personality than I do. I actually try to work with everybody and be nice. But he told a caller one time, he said, don't piss me off. He said, because I can kill your dance in 3 minutes. He goes, if you are not being respectful, I'll put on Can I Have This Dance at 45 RPM. And as most of you know, it gets played normally about 47. So, yeah, 52. Anyway, but right, that'll drag it down right now. And we do have to work together because we actually are each capable of causing harm to the other part of the program. It should not be our goal, but we can do it sometimes without realizing it.
Right, and keep in mind, we are not there for ourselves. We're there for the dancers that came and paid money to come and dance. And if we're not getting along and we're saying, well, if they're going to do that, I'm going to, watch what I do next. And you play that really slow round and just kill. They just threw out mountain music or Oh Lonesome Me, and they're swinging from the rafters. And then here comes Could I Have This Dance? And I'm like, what just happened?
Rochelle Katz, San Diego, California, Cuer. So I guess what I would like to ask is what are some, maybe from the fellow cuers here as well as the panel, what are some tips? Because I know of 2 halls I can think of right off the bat where there are no other places for those dancers to go and chat. And so short of shushing the dancers, which I don't do and I don't like to do, my only other option is just to turn my music up. And I don't want to do that either because now you're trying to talk over music, but what are some ideas that I could implement if I'm in those halls too, so I can make sure that my dancers, as well as the square dancers, have a positive experience.
If I may just comment on that, is there room in the back of the hall perhaps that the people talking could go towards the back more? No.
Okay. My ultimate, when nothing else works, is I say, round dancers, would you please turn toward the outside of the hall and give the square dancers a round of applause to thank them for being quiet during the round? Yeah. In other words, thank them for something they haven't done yet. It won't last all night, but it'll last a couple of tips.
Judy Russell, Oregon. Is this a club that you call at routinely? Involve your club members. Ask them if they ask, especially the ones that are the loudest and are the maybe the largest problem. Ask them if they'll help you. Ask them if and give them an example. Could you please, when you're talking back there, utilize that opportunity to teach these people that we need to. Would you talk to me? But I'd like to step out of here so we don't disturb. Or I'd like to talk quieter so we don't disturb the rest. And put them to work helping you, especially the ones that are the largest problem.
You take the biggest problem, you ask them, could you please go make sure that when you're talking to that one, keep them down. And then you've got you've solved the two biggest problems with one little conversation.
John Maris, San Diego, California. A little different track. This is situations where you have multiple callers and cuers at a dance. In the old days, when we had records, we would walk up to the stage with our two records and perhaps our microphone, and we'd do our thing, and then we'd take those two records and our microphone, and we would leave the table, the stage. Well, now we're in the age of laptops, and I'm trying to be objective here, but there was one dance in particular where one half of the table had enough room for one laptop, and then the other half of the table had, the laptops on these stands, that are high up because people. So there was a laptop on a stand, laptop on a stand, laptop on a stand. And I was calling a tip with Andy Alameo, and, Andy's not as tall as I am. And he was on the side with the laptops on the stand, and I don't think he could see the dancers, or vice versa. Can we talk about a little bit on the ethics of sort of equipment movement?
Was the table horizontal across the stage?
It was horizontal, yes. Yes.
When possible, take that table vertical. For one thing, with that horizontal table and you're behind it, now you have a barrier between you and the dancers, and that's true. That's true for callers and cuers. Take away those barriers as much as possible. And if somebody's got that table horizontal when I walk in, the first thing we do is twist that table. And if you're working with another caller or cuer who wants it with two tables, you can make an L if you want to. But that's my suggestion.
Susan Snyder again, Jacksonville, Florida. Sometimes going back to the people in the room making a lot of noise with their conversation, occasionally I have enlisted the help of the caller to try to remind the people that there's more square dancers than there are round dancers, but they need to enjoy their dance as much as the square dancers. So sometimes, especially if the caller is particularly popular with the dancers, that sometimes has been a help to try to enlist the caller.
And that's called working together, right? Yeah.
Sorry. I know it's not my turn. Erin Byers. But you have to be careful that you're not scolding the dancers and telling them they're being bad, which is why I like to go the other way and thank them for being good before they ever are. And then they feel guilty if they're not.
Really quickly, one of the things I do is because I always keep forgetting to buy one of those nifty stands because I know exactly what you're talking about. Because me and John have worked together before, so I actually, if there's a podium in the hall, I prefer to use the podium. That way I'm completely off the caller's table. I've got control of my laptop. It's not in the way of his stuff. I'll use the podium. And most calls will have a podium.
And John, to your point where there are multiple callers and multiple computers, and you said they used to come up with their 2 records, walk up there with few exceptions, we all have a smartphone that will play music, and there's an application that will do the slowing down, the pitch shift, whatever. You can walk up with the phone and plug in without going, for one tip. You don't want to do that with a full dance, but for one tip, National Convention this year, I just had a couple of spots. I didn't take my computer into that hall. I walked in with everything I needed on my phone. Airplane mode. Airplane mode, airplane mode.
Alan Hurst, Sunnyvale, California. Something I was made to practice by one of my mentors is they told me to spend a couple of hours learning how to set up and tear down my computer and my calling gear and my microphone, and my job is to get my butt up and off that stage in 2 minutes or less. Not everybody is that considerate, but the people I have worked with have told me how much they appreciate that I will get my butt off the stage when my time is up. Regarding working with people who have their own equipment, moving stuff around, just a warning. If you're working with somebody and you need them to move the equipment, ask them to move it. Do not touch their equipment. You keep your hands only on your own equipment.
And that's for your own safety.
For your own safety.
If the worst happened and you bumped something and it dropped, you don't want that on you.
And Judy Russell, Oregon. And as an extension to that, if you're the person up there on the stage, I don't care if you're the caller or the cuer, and somebody comes up to do a guest tip, please, please, please stick around and pay attention, because sometimes we don't know your equipment as well as our own. We think we might, but we don't. I go up to one, and he's got a mixer that's as big as your tabletop. And, I'm used to a little mixer for 6 people maybe, 6 lines, and he's got this huge thing, and I had my cord wrap around at one time as I moved, and I turned all my sound off, and I'm standing up there going, help. So please be considerate of that guest that you're allowing up there, and make sure that they're able to function before you turn your back and walk away.
And I'm just going to repeat something Dawn said earlier. When you're changing out microphones and things, turn the volume down. There's nothing worse than plugging in and that big squeal and the dancers go, oh, we're here. Yeah. Anything else? Okay.
Risha Schlitter from Cary, North Carolina. This is going back to when you say recognize each other at the end.
Mm-hmm.
A few years ago, I heard a caller partner say that I'd go with my partner to all the dances and I do all this work for them, and it's a slap in the face that I don't get recognized. And I'm thinking, well, maybe it's a caller's fault. So I was wondering, like, what is the appropriateness, the protocol, whatever, for the caller to acknowledge their partner? Is it their place to do it? Is it the club's place to do it? I mean, what's the etiquette on it?
Yeah, somebody just said both. Sure. Callers, if your partner's in the hall and you're not recognizing them, shame on you. Shame, shame, shame on you. Yeah, you got bigger problems than that. Yeah, maybe. So, yeah, and for the club to do it, too, I know lots of times. And when we're recognizing that another caller's in the hall, Vic will always say, so-and-so is here and their lovely wife, or so-and-so is here and their partner, or whatever. And whatever you do, if they turn to you and say, what's his wife's name? If you don't know, don't give them. And if you're not sure, don't tell them. It's just a quick, funny story, because Vic says to me, what's Brent's wife's name? And I turned to him and I said, Robin. And apparently there's a movie star named Robin Lively, and I put the right last name with the wrong first name. And so Brent says, we're so happy, or Vic, we're so happy to have Brent and Robin here. She comes up at the end, that was nice, but who's Robin? and I own that, but it has to become a standing joke amongst us. But now he knows if he says, what's their name, and I say Robin, he knows don't believe her.
Darren from Lompoc again. I don't know. You pretty much said everything I was going to say. I always try. I think communication between the caller and the cuer are very important. And I make it a point to introduce the cuer at the beginning of the dance. I just recently did a dance where someone came up to me at the beginning. I had squared. It was right before the first tip. Came up and they said, "Well, it doesn't look like it's the president that's supposed to come up and introduce you, but apparently they're not doing that." So this dancer came up and introduced me, and I was a little surprised. There were some other things at that dance I was a little surprised at too. I don't know if I'll be doing that dance anymore, but I always make it a point to introduce the caller or the cuer, not only the cuer but their partner as well. Because I've had partners come up and say, "Thanks for introducing me," because my partner can't seem to remember to reintroduce me. I'm like, "You're welcome." But I always and thank the cuer at the end of the dance and their partner.
Again, if their partners are with them, what
right.
is the harm of adding that? It takes, another 2 seconds, and better safe than...
And what is it with us callers about forgetting to introduce our own partners? I don't know. It's just, for some of us, it's not that we don't want to. It's just we have so many things on our mind that once in a while it just slips our mind. And in some cases, because my partner, in some cases, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable introducing my partner because my partner is not a woman. It's another man. And so I do a lot of straight dances, and I'm not always sure how that's going to be received. In some cases, I just don't give it, and I'll just introduce them. I don't give a hoot, and I'll just introduce them anyways. But sometimes that's in the back of my mind. I'm not like, and it's 2017. I shouldn't be that way, but I am. So, but yeah, I always. And one other thing I was going to mention about round dancing, it's a program. We're working together, and sometimes cuers will come up to me, "Hey, we're coming to the end of the dance. You only want me to do one round this time?"
Yep.
And I'm like, "Oh, hell no. No, you're doing your 2 rounds. If we come to the end and there's only time for one song, one square dance song, then there's only one square dance song." Oh, thank you. But we're going to put in the round dancers. I'm going to make those round dance cuers work till the end. You're putting in your 2 songs, and I'll cut mine. I'll shorten my, because the square dancing you can kind of cut the tips a little shorter than you can round dancing. You're stuck till the end of the song. Not to mean that in a bad way, but you got to go through the whole song. Whereas us callers, bow to the part, you can do a 30-second patter and move on to the singing call. So that's it.
And I heard someone say you're unique, and that is true. It depends on the caller you are on that stage with that evening. If there's time for a short tip in one round, I will always ask, okay, looks like, we're quitting at 10:30. Do you want me to just do 1 round this time? Do you have a full tip? And some of them will say no, and no, go ahead and do 2. I got it. And others will go, well, that sounds good. That sounds great. So I always ask the question because I don't get the same answer every time. Yep.
So, sorry, Rochelle Cadigan, San Diego. I have one more thing, and then I got to sneak out and do something for Shauna. So, real quickly, if I may make a suggestion to both the callers and the cuers in the room, especially if you're a seasoned caller or a seasoned cuer, and you bring up a newer member of your calling or queuing community, and ask them to do a guest cue, or that if they're done, if they've made a mistake while they're on stage, or they queued something wrong, or they called something wrong, or they got lost. I am well receptive to any critique anybody wants to give me, but wait till I'm off the stage. Don't rush the stage and tell me I did something wrong or rush the stage for the caller you brought up, take them off to the side or take them outside, because I've actually had that happen, and it's actually pretty. It's embarrassing.
It's demeaning.
Yeah.
And most of the time, you know you made that mistake. You don't need somebody rushing the stage to tell you you made that mistake.
Steve Green, Monroe, North Carolina. Introductions to partners. I'm okay with Mr. Patty. That's fine.
One last thing. I'm Mr. Shauna. And even if I'm calling the dance, Shauna gets introduced by the president before I do. It's just, that's how it works. I don't blame him.
Thanks, Rochelle. I think probably the reason they asked Dawn and I to do this is we both cue.
Yeah, I think so.
And call. And it's different. Your perspective is different as a cuer than it is as a caller. And it's interesting to play both sides of that and see the perspective of the other. Just recognize they're not the same. And the most important thing is that we communicate and work together.
And that's what it's all about.
Yep.
And we're here for our audience, which are the dancers.
Yep. Any final words? All right, then that's it. Common courtesy. Work together.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Big hand for Shauna Kaaria and her partner Vic.